Sometimes in life there are moments so powerful, so unexpectedly honest, that they touch something deep inside us, something we never quite forget. Moments that rise out of ordinary days and change the way we see love, memory, and the people we hold closest to our hearts. Today I want to share one of those moments with you, a moment that arrived quietly, without warning, yet carried more truth and emotion than anything I could have prepared myself for. It was a moment born in the middle of confusion, wrapped in the fog of dementia, and yet shining with a clarity so pure that it stopped me in my tracks. It was the kind of moment that reminds you how fragile time is and how deeply we can still connect, even when everything else seems to be slipping away. If you've ever loved someone through their hardest days, if you've ever watched a piece of someone you cherish slowly fade, or if you've ever held on to a memory because it was all you had left, then what I'm about to share will speak to you. Because this is more than a story. It's a reminder of the strength of the human spirit, the power of love, and the way a single sentence can stay with you forever. Stay with me because this moment is one that changed me, and I believe it may touch something in you too. A sudden moment of clarity in someone experiencing dementia is often described as breathtaking, unexpected, and deeply moving because it breaks through the haze that usually surrounds their thoughts, memories, and communication. It's the kind of moment that catches you entirely off guard because you become so used to fragmented conversations, pauses, forgetfulness, and confusion that hearing something coherent feels almost unreal. When a person who has been drifting through fog suddenly speaks with intention, certainty, or emotional awareness, it feels like watching the sun break through a long stretch of heavy clouds. There's a stillness to it, a kind of emotional shock, because you instantly recognize that what you're hearing is not random or accidental. It's a glimpse of who they used to be, who they still are, beneath the layers of memory loss. What makes these moments so powerful is the contrast. You've witnessed the disorientation, the lost words, the blank stares, the fading pieces of their personality. So when clarity appears, it feels precious and fragile. You find yourself hanging on to every word, afraid to interrupt or breathe too loudly, because you don't want the moment to slip away. And in that brief clarity, the person may say something profound, something emotionally heavy, or spiritually meaningful, something that reminds you of their depth, their history, and their soul. It becomes a moment that not only reveals their awareness, but also reaffirms your connection to them. There's also a bittersweetness to these moments. On one hand, you feel grateful to hear them speak clearly, to connect in a way you thought might no longer be possible. On the other hand, it hurts because the clarity can bring up thoughts or feelings they haven't been able to express in a long time. It can remind you of how much has been lost, how much you missed the version of them that lived without confusion. This sudden lucidity becomes a double-edged experience, a gift wrapped in grief. In these moments, time feels different, everything slows down, and you become hyper-aware of what's happening. Even while it's happening, that you'll remember it for the rest of your life. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was real in a way that feels rare when dementia is involved. An unexpected emotional weight often accompanies these rare lucid moments, creating a mix of feelings that collide all at once. It's not something you can prepare for, even if you've been walking the journey of dementia for years. When someone who has been drifting in and out of awareness suddenly says something meaningful, something intentional, it hits with a force that feels much larger than the moment itself. The emotional weight comes from the shock of hearing clarity where you've grown accustomed to confusion. You expect fragments or silence, but instead you're met with a sentence that carries understanding, depth, or even acceptance. That contrast creates an immediate surge of emotion because it reminds you of everything that used to be normal conversations, shared memories, moments of connection, things that now feel distant or lost. This emotional intensity also comes from the content of what's being said. When the moment involves something as profound as speaking about heaven, the afterlife, or an awareness of nearing the end, it adds another layer entirely. Suddenly you're faced with the reality of loss in a way that's impossible to ignore. It becomes a moment that forces you to confront emotions you've been trying to manage quietly, like fear, grief, love, and acceptance. Even if the person speaks with calmness or clarity, the listener may feel overwhelmed, because behind the clear words lies the painful truth of what's happening. The emotional heaviness is not just about the words, it's about the context, the history, and the fragile state of the person speaking. A conversation about heaven during a moment of clarity carries a depth that goes far beyond the words themselves. It becomes a window into what the person is feeling, fearing, or accepting internally, even when their day-to-day communication is fragmented or uncertain. When dementia is present, most conversations are unpredictable, sometimes disjointed, sometimes repetitive, sometimes distant. So when a coherent, meaningful statement emerges, especially about something as profound as heaven, it takes on tremendous emotional significance. It shows that, despite the confusion that often clouds their mind, there is still an inner awareness, a sense of spirituality, or a connection to beliefs that shape their life long before dementia ever appeared. Talking about heaven is not like talking about the weather or a casual memory. It touches on mortality, peace, transition, and the possibility of a final journey. Hearing someone speak about it with clarity can feel surreal. It brings forward an understanding that they may sense something shifting within themselves, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual. For the listener, this can be both comforting and deeply painful. Comforting because it shows they feel some kind of calm or acceptance. Painful because it confirms the reality of what may be approaching. The content of these conversations often holds a softness, a gentleness, or a certain certainty that feels strangely grounding. It's as if the person has tapped into a deeper layer of themselves, bypassing the confusion that usually takes over. Even a few simple words can carry the weight of a lifetime of belief and experience. You might hear them speak with a tone that hasn't surfaced in a long time, or express ideas they haven't been able to articulate for months. That alone makes the moment memorable. Whether or not heaven is something you personally envision, hearing them speak of it may feel like they're reaching for something peaceful, something safe and familiar. This can stir up conflicting emotions: gratitude that they seem calm, fear of losing them, sorrow for the reality behind their words, and a tender kind of love for the vulnerability they're showing. What makes such a conversation unforgettable is the way it blends clarity with heartbreak. It becomes a deeply human moment, raw, honest, and poignant, because it reveals both their awareness and their fragility, and it lingers in your memory not because it was long or elaborate, but because it was meaningful in a way few moments ever are. The contrast between lucidity and confusion is one of the most emotionally complex parts of dementia, because it creates a rhythm of unpredictability that keeps you constantly adjusting your expectations. Most days are shaped by moments of disorientation, forgotten names, misplaced memories, and thoughts that drift in and out without direction. You learn to navigate the repetitions, the blank pauses, and the distant expressions. It becomes a new kind of normal, one you slowly adapt to even though it hurts. But then without warning, there comes a moment where everything sharpens, where the person you've been missing, the version of them before dementia, breaks through for just a breath of time. That sudden clarity stands in such stark contrast to the usual confusion that it almost feels unreal. This shift is so striking because it reminds you of the person they were, the person you still love and look for behind the fog. When they speak clearly, remember something specific, or express a deep thought, your heart reacts instantly. It feels like a reunion, brief but powerful. Yet the contrast is also painful because it highlights how much dementia has taken. You become aware of the gap between who they used to be and the fragmented moments you get. Now, the return of clarity can make you realize how much you miss their mind, their personality, their way of communicating. It's a reminder of everything that has slowly faded over time. The emotional whiplash created by this contrast is difficult to describe. One moment you're helping them piece together simple thoughts, and the next you're hearing something so coherent and meaningful that it feels like a message from the past. You might feel joy in hearing their voice sound like itself again, but that joy is wrapped tightly with grief, because you know the clarity won't last. It can disappear as quickly as it arrived, slipping back into confusion and leaving you holding onto the memory of that brief spark. This sharp difference between clarity and confusion also creates moments that become deeply significant. You remember every word they said, every expression on their face, every tone in their voice, because it felt like a gift, a window into their true self that dementia can't completely erase. Even when the confusion returns, the clarity lingers in your mind, becoming something you replay, cherish, and ache for. It's this contrast that gives such moments their emotional power, making them unforgettable and heavier than almost anything else you experience during the journey with dementia. A lasting memory forms in moments that carry emotional weight, and when clarity breaks through dementia, it creates an imprint that feels almost permanent. It's not just the words that stay with you, it's the atmosphere, the expression, the tone, the stillness of the moment. These experiences stand out because they contrast so sharply with the day-to-day reality of forgetfulness and confusion. When someone who often struggles to communicate suddenly speaks with understanding or intention, it becomes a moment your mind instinctively captures. You remember where you were sitting, how the light looked in the room, the sound of their voice, and even the feeling in your chest as it happened. It becomes a mental snapshot that doesn't fade the way ordinary memories do. This kind of memory lingers because it is tied to emotion, love, grief, hope, fear, gratitude, all tangled together. When a rare moment of clarity surfaces, especially one involving something profound, your heart reacts before your mind can catch up. That emotional response locks the moment in place. It echoes, it replays. You find yourself thinking about it long after it's passed, not because you want to hold on to the pain, but because the closeness in that moment felt real and powerful. It becomes part of your personal story with them, a memory you return to when you're missing how things used to be. A moment like this can also bring a sense of meaning. Even though dementia strips away consistency and predictability, this one memory becomes something steady, something you can hold on to. You may revisit it for comfort, or because you want to make sense of it, or simply because it reminds you of the person beneath the illness. It carries significance that goes beyond the moment itself. It becomes a symbol of connection, of awareness of who they are beyond the confusion. Knowing the memory won't be repeated gives it even more weight. Moments of clarity are unpredictable, and you often know while it's happening that it might be the last time you experience something so coherent or intimate. That awareness presses the moment deeper into your heart, and long after the conversation ends, long after the clarity fades, the memory remains vivid. It becomes something you treasure, even if it hurts. It becomes something you replay to remind yourself of the love, the bond, and the truth of who they always were beneath the fog of dementia. A moment like this becomes a reminder of love, loss, and acceptance, because it pulls together all the emotions you've been carrying silently throughout the dementia journey. Even when things are difficult, even when communication breaks down, the love you feel doesn't fade. It shifts, it stretches, it adapts, but it remains constant. When a rare moment of clarity appears, especially one involving something as delicate as speaking about heaven, it brings that love into sharp focus. You feel the depth of your bond more intensely because you recognize how precious it is, how fragile it has become, and how deeply it still lives within you. At the same time, moments like these remind you of loss. Not just the loss that may be approaching, but the losses you've already endured along the way. Dementia takes pieces slowly, memories, conversations, familiar expressions, shared understanding. Each day brings small changes that accumulate into something heavy. And then, when clarity breaks through, it highlights just how much has changed. You hear the unmistakable echo of the person they used to be, and it brings both comfort and heartbreak. That mix is painful because it reminds you of what has slipped away, while also reminding you that part of them is still there, even if only for a moment. Acceptance is another layer woven into this experience. Not the kind of acceptance that feels peaceful or complete, but the kind that grows out of necessity, the acceptance of what you cannot change, of a future you cannot control, of a reality you didn't choose but must navigate. When they speak clearly about heaven or express awareness of their own journey, it can feel like they are accepting something you're still struggling to come to terms with. Their calmness or certainty can be difficult to hear, but it also creates a space where you begin to face the truth alongside them, even if your heart resists it. These moments bind all three emotions together in a way that feels overwhelming but meaningful. Love is present in the closeness of the moment. Loss is present in the knowledge of what is slipping away, and acceptance begins to quietly form as you realize that the moment itself is something to cherish rather than fear. The clarity acts as a mirror, reflecting the complexity of what you're feeling, and it stays with you because it represents the full emotional landscape of caring for someone moving through the later stages of dementia. In the end, these rare moments of clarity become more than just memories. They become powerful reminders of connection, love, and the fragile humanity woven through even the most difficult chapters of life. They show that beneath the confusion, beneath the fading memories, there is still a soul trying to reach out, still a spark of recognition, still a heartbeat that speaks in ways words cannot fully capture. These moments stay with us because they hold truth, vulnerability, and meaning. They teach us that even in the face of loss, there is beauty, even in the pain, there is purpose. And even in the quietest moments, there is a depth of love that dementia cannot erase. Thank you for taking the time to bring such a tender experience to life through words. Your willingness to share and reflect on it speaks volumes about your heart. I wish you strength, clarity, and comfort as you continue navigating memories that are both beautiful and heavy. Good luck as you move forward. May your words resonate with others who need to hear them. And may you always feel the love that lives in the moments you'll never forget.